I understand the notion of the Rainbow Nation in '94 after the atrocities of apartheid. But then I feel that we've now reached the point where this Rainbow Nation notion and letting go of your own culture to being a mengelmoes almost, I think is taking away from your own culture.
Absolutely.
And it's not just Afrikaans culture. It's not just Xhosa Zulu culture. I think what we need to do and what makes us unique, especially when tourists come here, when they come here and they want to experience a Zulu village or a Xhosa village or go to the Voortrekker Monument. What we have done now is we've taken almost that away from people, because if you are a proud Afrikaner, then you are a racist, or these perceptions. And I think that our cultures is what makes us unique.
Correct.
And yes, there's nothing to say, listen, you can't have also a Zulu person over or have a Chisanyama, but it's almost as if mainstream media and specifically the ANC and I would say your leftist parties are condemning people for celebrating their culture.
Absolutely. The ANC's point of view is basically what happened in Mozambique many years ago with Frelimo, when it was said, for the nation to live, the tribe must die. That's a fallacy. It's absurd. I want to use the example of a fruit salad. We all love a fruit salad, but allow me within the fruit salad to remain a pawpaw, a banana, or whatever the case may be, and we can all, our best interest, be part of a larger fruit salad. But if you want to make a smoothie of all of us, then communities say, no, I don't want to become a smoothie, recognize me for who I am, and then I want to get out. So that's a fine balance that we need to do, and that's exactly the message that we are putting on the table.
Let's say you had the choice to make in '94 as to what type of country we would be. Would you have stuck with a democracy in the state of a constitutional democracy, or would you have gone more for a federalist type of state?
It should have been a combination. The fact that you've got a constitutional democracy is good, it's positive, but the constitution on its own, people quite often refer to the current constitution as the final constitution. And I always say there's no such thing, it's only the current constitution, it can be changed. But obviously the answer would have been a more federal kind of structure. And as a matter of fact, way back, December 1993, I was on a visit to Europe with the ANC by the predecessor of our party, which was then the Afrikaner Volksfront. And we went in a joint delegation with some senior ANC people to try and convince them about federalism. We went to Belgium, to Germany. We ended up in Switzerland at a conference there at the Institute for Federalism, because that would be a more realistic approach. For example, why should some official or some politician up in the union buildings decide what we teach our children at school in the Eastern Cape or in the Western Cape or the Northern Cape? We should bring those things closer to the communities and to the people to decide themselves what they would like to do in terms of devolving power to the lowest possible base.
What would you say differentiates the Freedom Front Plus from the Democratic Alliance when it comes to, firstly, the role in the GNU, but also what they have to offer?
Yes, I think first of all, if you look at the positioning of the different parties, the Democratic Alliance is a liberal party. The values that they are supportive of, the positioning of the Democratic Alliance is not necessarily what I think is in the hearts and the minds of a vast group of South Africans. South Africans in general are really conservative kind of people. Not extreme, but they support basic values in terms of Christian values. They support freedom of expression. They support the rule of law, decentralization, free economy. Many of the things that are very much patriotic kind of values they support. The DA has got a different approach in that regard, and people don't necessarily feel comfortable with that kind of approach. And what happened in the past was people were under the false impression that if you want to act against the ANC and prevent the ANC from doing what they do, you have to vote for the bigger party. Well, that's a fallacy, because if you don't have the ability to become the majority on your own, you're also a small party. You're just a bigger small party. Even the ANC is now a small party in that sense. They couldn't get to 50% in the last election. They need other parties to govern. That is the first thing I think in that regard. Secondly, the Democratic Alliance seems to be so close, and I think they are trapped in the government of national unity. Remember, the reason the DA gave why they had to do this was to keep the MK and the EFF out of government. Now, if that is your reason why you are in there, you can never leave. As long as they exist, you are trapped. You have to be there. That's not our reason. I've said from the beginning, we are not there for positions. That's not what it's about. We want to be there to be part of the discussion and to make a difference in terms of decisions taken. That's also important for our society, our community, our minority groups in South Africa. And that is the test. Are we being able to influence things or not. And I must be honest, I'm under huge pressure to move out of the government of national unity at this stage. And we have to see how that's going to play out. But from our perspective in the Freedom Front Plus, we say coalitions it's going to be the future. And after next year's general election, local government election, we're going to see coalitions throughout South Africa most likely, and we would like to play a role there. And we think we can make a difference.
Very well said. And the thing that I've also heard is the indoctrination of saying we need to vote. We shouldn't split the vote. Unfortunately, what we've seen in South Africa is that bigger isn't always better.
No.
And look, the one thing I said it recently, it's hard to argue against great service delivery. I mean, the Western Cape as an example, you can clearly see a difference compared to the rest of the country.
Yep.
However, this isn't a magic trick. This is just applying the legislation.
Exactly.
Some political parties don't want to apply the legislation, and that is why service delivery is poor. That is why governance is poor.
Yeah.
But it's not like this party has a magic recipe that nobody else has.
No, it's absolutely true. For example, only yesterday, there was a press conference up in George, and the Freedom Front Plus has now thrown a life buoy to the Democratic Alliance. They are losing their majority. We step back into a coalition with the Democratic Alliance, and we will make sure that George remains in safe hands in that instance. It's not true. Quite often it's being said, don't waste your vote on a smaller party. No. You know, when you do waste your vote, if you vote for a party that doesn't share your values and doesn't share what is important to you, then your vote is being used, but it's steered in a different direction. That's a wasted vote. But in terms of the system, you cannot waste your vote. All votes count. We've got a proportional system. Votes are counted in the end, and the balance is brought between ward councillors and PR councillors. In the end, that is how your councils are constructed.
And just also be very careful of what you wish for when it comes to big parties, specifically because if you ask some people in Cape Town, thousands of people in Cape Town with rates and taxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know,
I'm one of them. I'm paying these rates and taxes in Cape Town. I'm going to make a huge thing in the election that comes next year.
Yeah.
Because it's just taking from one community and subsidizing another one to such an extent that we are being taxed out of our homes. People are finding it very difficult, and people should understand all blue is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So that's just the reality.
And then also with regards to conservatism, it's almost as if a lot of people associate apartheid with conservatism. And if you look at, like you mentioned earlier, we are mostly a Christian nation.
Yeah.
In actual fact, 85%.
Exactly.
And fundamentally, if you are a Christian, there are some sort of conservative elements that you have to believe in.
Yes.
So this notion, I think it's not necessarily a battle for the Freedom Front Plus, but it's a battle for conservatism, just to educate people and say,
Correct.
listen, conservatism doesn't mean verkrampte.
Never,
it doesn't
ever.
mean
Not at all.
anything other, or doesn't mean you want separatism or anything like that.
No, completely not. The reality to a certain extent is that it's all around the world at the moment. The resurgence of family values, people that feel strongly about those kind of things, that family is important, patriotism, be proud of who you are, don't be shy for your identity, you are who you are, but it's a strength, it's not a weakness. Even if you look at our own constitution, 12 now, 12 official languages. We are a very diverse society. So let's get the best out of that and accommodate the aspirations of communities. But that is in terms of the broader values of what is important to people. And those are those basic values that have stood the test of time.
So a lot has been said about the race-based legislation in South Africa. The government famously came out and said that there is no race-regulated laws in South Africa, and that was after a brilliant campaign by Solidariteit, by the way, which, freedom of speech seems now not to be possible anymore because they just ripped down the banners. But what is your take? I think it's so obvious that we have this race-based legislation in this country, 145 laws that discriminate directly on the basis of race. What is your take on the government acting like it doesn't exist?
I think they are denying this. They really believe that it's okay, it's fine, it's normal, and they are behind the times. That is, to a very large extent, that also played the role in the Trump administration's view of South Africa. The American dream is based on equal opportunities. Now, the ANC is very strongly about equality, but there's the huge fundamental difference. We also support equality, but then it means we should all have equal opportunity. But the ANC is committed to equality of outcomes. And you will never achieve equality of outcomes, not in this world, never ever. And in order to do that, they will always keep transformation alive, and they need these laws to try and do that. But by doing that, you must now come and think yourselves. We've had New South Africa for the last 31 years. So any South African 31 years and younger were born after 1994. What do they understand of the past in terms of discriminatory laws, etc.? Why should you now create a new group of people being discriminated against? And it is not as if these 145 laws do have a positive effect. I've asked the president, and he was very annoyed when I asked him that. I said, if we look at the economic growth that we don't have, if you look at the problem of unemployment in South Africa, clearly that policies are not working. When are we going to look at new policies? Now, he then gave me Economics 101 lesson, which was quite fascinating, but more and more pressure will come to amend and move away from those things. And that is part of one of the conditions from the United States' point of view in terms of the reset of relations. You can deny it as much as you like, but you are creating new problems with those kind of laws, and you're not assisting. You are busy with elite empowerment, and you're not empowering poor people at all.
Fundamentally, the point of these race-based legislation, according to government initially, was for transformation and redress. We have the highest youth unemployment in the world. We have a 40% broad definition of unemployment.
Yes.
Broad-based Black economic empowerment has just enriched a handful of people. So fundamentally, even if you had to go on a moral aspect that this was to right the wrongs of apartheid, it has not done so.
It failed.
And I unfortunately believe that that period is over. Because now, if you want to still implement it now, you are directly discriminating against young individuals that had no hand in apartheid. So their balls up means that that gap is gone. Because if they want to still compete or implement it, they are going to do exactly what the apartheid government did.
Exactly. No, it failed. And in the process, we lost 30 years. That is shocking.